Good morning, grade 4. Welcome to Theme. As always, I'm Mr. Mo. Today is April 8th. It is Wednesday. And today we are starting our new unit on the Industrial Revolution. So let's tuck in and get ready, shall we? So we are going to take a closer look at the Industrial Revolution and why it was so important. Why did we make this switch from agriculture to industrial? So, what was the Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution was a period of tremendous change in Britain, which lasted from around 1750 until 1900. In this period of 150 years, almost every aspect of their life changed. It was the birth of the modern world, where Britain changed from a rural society to an industrial, wealthy nation. So, it's obviously important that we need to know what industry is. Industry is a collection of companies all involved in the same type of production or business. So here's an example of your typical house in the UK, 1750. Not a lot going on, stone houses, sheep's in the front lawn. Now it's important to remember that before the Industrial Revolution, Britain was an agricultural country. They only grew things. There were no factories to build things. People mostly lived on farms, growing their own produce and raising their own livestock. The fastest transport for most people was a horse and a cart. Most industry, like pottery and weaving, were done at home. They were called cottage industries because goods were manufactured in homes, usually cottages. Wife and kids all sitting around working, trying to create something together. Now, in 1750, only a small percentage of people actually lived in large cities. Most of the people were scattered across the country. The total population was only 10 million. Now, let's flash forward 150 years into the future. Now, after the Industrial Revolution, Britain was a country that has changed hugely. Industries have been transformed by key inventions, such as the steam engine, which led to establishments of factories all over the country. This is when we start to see huge migrations to the big cities, where people are leaving the countryside and moving to the big city. Transporting people and goods across the country became much faster with the development of canals, roads, and railways. The population of Britain had boomed to around 30 million people, according to a 1901 census. Remember, it only was 10 million 150 years earlier. Now, Britain has changed so much during the Industrial Revolution that it was almost unrecognizable. For example, a trip from Manchester to London took around 4 days in 1970. By 1880, it only took 4 hours. Now, of course, with great leaps forward in technology and industry, can you try and think of any problems that this might cause? Also, would these problems have affected everybody in Britain or just a select group of people? So why was there an Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution occurred because people realized that they could use coal and steam to power large machines. Before that, imagine you're a farmer in the field and you need to till up the ground, and for this you need a horse or a cow or ox. What happens if your horse doesn't want to move that day? What happens if your cow wants to sleep all day? Then you can't tend to your farm. Now you have coal and steam. You have so much more production to lead to more products. Now, with the creation of coal and steam engines, much more creative inventions could be created. We have the underground subway system, we have automobiles, telephones, light bulbs, steam engines, cotton gins. A number of different inventions were created because of this potential energy. Well, what about transportation? The Industrial Revolution was also built on new developments in transport. These helped to link towns to boost trades of goods, produce, textiles, and coal that could be carried across the country quickly and cheaply. There were a number of different ways that these technologies occurred. The most obvious of these was the railway. With the first passenger railway being built in 1825, railway mania happened in Britain in the 1840s. Railways became the fastest modes of transportation, and $3 billion were invested in the railway all over the country, which created more jobs, which created more factories to create the steel for the railway itself. This was something that drove the country wild. Everybody wanted to get on the train to go for a ride. Also, canals were vital for transporting coal and other materials to factories in these growing cities. Lots of money was invested in these canals, which connected two rivers, which made it faster to transport large quantities of things from one area to another. Also, roads were developed better. During the Industrial Revolution, better roads were developed with firmer foundations, good drainage, and a smooth surface. This allowed people to travel more efficiently across the country and goods to be transported more easily. The better the road, the faster you can travel. So, sounds pretty great. Let's try to imagine what life was like during the Industrial Revolution. New machines invented during the Industrial Revolution combined with the flexibility of steam power led to huge factories being built in towns. This resulted in people migrating to towns from the countryside. People were attracted to the factory work by reliable pay and the availability of work. If you can get paid and you know that you're going to have a job for a while, this is very enticing to lure you from the countryside to the big city. However, working in these factories were extremely difficult. People worked for very long shifts in dirty, noisy, and very dangerous conditions. It's important to remember that during the Industrial Revolution, there were not many laws to protect the workers in the factory. If you got hurt, the factory would just replace you and bring somebody else in. No laws were there to help you to keep you safe. Living conditions were atrocious as well. Factories sprang up very quickly during this period. Houses for workers were built rapidly and close to the place of work. Workers often lived in poor quality and cramped housing. The cheapest type of housing was back-to-back terracing. These terraces rarely had clean running water access. It was common for diseases to spread quickly in these areas. This led to outbreaks of disease such as cholera or diarrhea. Could you imagine living in a tight, closed area? So many people, dirty living conditions, filthy. But you have to do it because you've moved from the countryside to the big city. I'm afraid to say the news is not good for the children either. During the Industrial Revolution, children as young as 5 years old were sent to the factories. It was important for poor families to send as many members of their family to the factory to work. If you didn't work, you didn't have money. If you didn't have money, you become homeless and you're living on the street. So as many kids as possible were sent to the factories. Children worked as chimney sweeps, being so small they could get inside of the chimney to clean it. In coal mines where smaller people fit in the cave better. As servants in cotton mills as well. Many were injured by machines or hurt in industrial accidents. This is a big problem at the time. There were no laws to protect children. This is when we start to see laws in place to protect children. So, before 1800, school was not free, and most poor children only received education in a Sunday school. If you didn't have money, you couldn't go to school, you had to work. In 1833, the government passed the Factory Act, making 2 hours of education a day mandatory for children who were working in the factory. The government also granted money to charities to help schools for the first time. Then, in 1844, the Ragged Schools Union was set up to give schooling to very poor children. In 1870, the Foster's Act is set up as a state-funded board school for primary education. In 1880, the Education Act made school attendance compulsory for children between the ages of 5 and 10. No longer could children be spending their whole days in the factory. You had to go to school if you were between the ages of 5 and 10. In 1902, the Education Act established a system of secondary schools. So as you get older, now we've implemented a secondary school and high school and college for people to get their education. Britain after the Industrial Revolution is a very different place. The world has essentially shrunk because of exploration. Raw materials, foods, and goods can arrive faster to the places that they need to be. Some people made their fortunes off the railway and the railroad industry. However, it's important to remember many people lived in poverty and suffered from poor housing, poor working conditions, and health problems. So, What do you think? Do you think the Industrial Revolution had a positive or negative effect on the people of Britain? Was it worth it? And everybody's favorite homework time. This will be your homework in the folder. You're going to be drawing pictures of what you think when you read these statements. And finally, guys, be familiar with these 5 words. These are words that we're going to use a lot. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you on Thursday, guys. Bye-bye.